including kings, was liable to end up as a slave. But how did the flood come into it? Melting snow from the Armenian mountains increased the flow of the Euphrates in July. Records indicate that only then were the river channels deep enough for large vessels. Still, there was a risk. If Shurupak was hit by a freak storm just at the moment when river levels were at their highest, then the peaceful waters of the Euphrates could turn into a raging flood. But the average rainfall in dry years in July was 0. The odds on a catastrophic river flood in Mesopotamia would have been remote, about 1 in every 1,000 years. So if it happened, it should have been worth writing about. The Babylonian tablets say that on the day of the flood, Noah and his family were having a banquet on the barge. Then the weather suddenly began to change for the worse. A freak storm was beginning and a catastrophic flood was on its way. A storm that would threaten Noah's very survival. If a flash flood was big enough to sweep away Noah's Ark and put his life in danger, it would have began with rainfall of tropical intensity in the mountains. Mesopotamia isn't in the tropics, but there's evidence that hurricanes and tropical storms could get that far.
Some 6,000 years ago, it was much warmer and wetter, and it would be no surprise whatsoever to get a tropical storm. We could have had 10 times the rainfall. Some of these meteorological events are absolutely catastrophic, and these are the sort of events that we record in history. We don't record the normal day-to-day humdrum.
A freak storm, combined with the seasonal snowmelt, would have easily caused the Euphrates to flood the Mesopotamian plain. The Bible says the storm lasted for an incredible 40 days. The Babylonian tablets say it was 7. But even a single day would have been terrible, life-threatening. With much of his cargo left behind or swept away, Noah's barge would have been at the mercy of the raging Euphrates. The following day, say the Babylonian tablets, Noah and his family couldn't see land. The flood extended for miles. Noah and his family must have longed for the waters to subside and ground them on the banks of the Euphrates. But the banks were nowhere in sight. All versions of the story agree that they couldn't see land for at least 7 days. The Bible concludes that Noah's flood covered the whole world. But there is in fact another explanation. Noah's family would have believed that they were drifting on the flooded Euphrates. They would have been relieved that at the very least the river water meant they wouldn't die of thirst.
Salt.
But the Babylonian version suggests that the water was salty. Noah's Ark was no longer drifting on the flooded Euphrates. If you plot Noah's course from Shuruppak, now in the flooded plain, the currents could have swept his barge downstream into the Persian Gulf. This tallies with the Epic of Gilgamesh, which says that he looked upon the sea. There's no telling how long Noah and his family would have stayed marooned in the Persian Gulf. The Bible records more than a year. The Babylonian tablets suggest just a week. Either way, Noah and his family had a big problem: salty water. What would they drink? Without fresh water from rain or river, their only alternative would have been the beer they were carrying for their traders.
Beer is actually a good alternative. And we know they had it 3,500 years ago. They were brewing beer. And beer anyway is 98% water. And it's full of nutrients. Most important, it's sterile. And wouldn't suffer from contamination like water might.
One of the hallmarks of the Noah story is that the Ark is said to have landed in the mountains of Ararat. But if there was no global flood, then it's far more likely that it landed somewhere else altogether. The mountains of Ararat lie to the north of Shuruppak. Swept downriver, the barge would have run aground 500 miles away on the shores of the Persian Gulf. In the Bible, once the Ark has grounded, the story is almost over. But the Babylonian tablets hint that Noah's adventure was far from over. There are several puzzling references. One talks of the overthrowing of his kingship. Another says the flood hero was expelled,